What's up, guys? Welcome to the Beast Flipping Stick build part 2, where we're going to fix this epoxy and keep working on this handle. Stick around. Now, I'm not wearing sunglasses because I'm trying to be cool. I had eye surgery a couple days ago, so everything's just a little too bright. First thing we're going to do is we're going to fix this whoopsies we had with the dryer, the wire base dryer, because I wasn't paying attention when I set it up. That's on me, but you're going to have similar problems show up like this. I'm going to show you how to fix them. I moved the camera so you can see a little better what I'm doing. Epoxy is really forgiving. This has been cured probably about a week now since I started working on it last. All you're going to need is your hobby knife or a razor blade or razor knife, and you want to shave as much of this chunky stuff off. It's still fairly soft, and just get the chunks out of it, because what will happen is once we get all of this cut out of the way and we'll sand on it some, the epoxy is very forgiving. Even though this looks white, when you put a second coat of epoxy over damaged epoxy, the new coat will fill in and it'll become clear again. Once the new epoxy fills in all the gaps, even the microscopic kind of gaps, that's why it looks white. It's just light bouncing in the wrong direction. And once we get this trimmed down, you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, about 5 minutes with a sharp X-Acto knife and a little careful trimming, and I've got most of the crud and ugly off. So the next thing we're going to do, I'm going to get a sanding sponge and use my power wrapper like a mini lathe. I have one set up out in the garage if I'm doing something really dusty or I'm doing custom cork, but this is not going to be too dusty, so we're going to set it up and do it right here. Okay, I've got it set up in my power wrapper. I've got a sanding block. It's a foam sander. I got some screen, and then I've got some very fine 240 grit paper that I'm going to use on it last to make it smooth. And I've actually got a few bubbles that came through that I'm going to work on out here in the main grip area, because after this next coat of epoxy, we're going to put our labels on, and the effect of 2 or 3 or 4 coats of epoxy over a label is going to magnify. It's going to look really cool. You'll be able to look, it will seem like you can look through the blank. When you get this clear epoxy on and you get enough built up outside the blank, it's a really cool effect. So let's get busy on this. I'm going to start with the block and see if it works. I've got a coarse side and got a fine side. Let's see what happens here. That's somewhat better. Let's turn the speed up a little bit. Let's see what the screen will do here. Yep, screen is what we're going to use. Alright, we're going to take some of this off the EVA. This is really great for cleaning up EVA. You can clean up cork with it. You can do all kinds of stuff with this sanding screen. Alright, so the EVA is pretty. We got a nice shoulder here. This is pretty smooth. Now these scratches will disappear with this next coat of epoxy. Alright, so I've got a few bumps in here for the, I don't know if you can see that, there's an air bubble that showed up right there. Let's see if I can get the top of it off. I'm just shaving the top of that air bubble off. Got one, a little one there. You usually won't see them in a handle unless somebody's really inspecting it close, and honestly, usually you're the only one that ever sees these minor imperfections, because everybody's so wowed by, you know, the custom rod, they don't see these little things. But I'm a little picky. This rod is actually going to be Nathan's. He doesn't know that yet, but he's getting this as a flipping stick. It's a little too big boy of a stick for me, being the old guy, but he was talking about a new flipping stick, so he's getting this one. Alright, I think we got most of those bigger imperfections out with the X-Acto knife. We're going to hit it with this fine 240 to get it super silky smooth, and then we'll put another coat of epoxy on it. Alright, that's got it really smooth. We'll clean up this dust real quick and we'll get started with epoxy next. Y'all stick around. I'm just using good old-fashioned paper towel and a little bit of rubbing alcohol on it. You don't want a lot. But you can see how when that epoxy got wet with the alcohol, the scratches disappeared. Now they're going to completely disappear with the next coat of epoxy. Super smooth. Got our workspace cleaned up. Let's get busy with epoxy. There, we're mixing 3 milliliters of each, just to make sure we get an even 1-to-1 ratio. You've seen me do this 100 times by now, so I'll probably fast forward through this. But I did want to mention one thing. Epoxy, and you want to check your brush. These brushes, I buy them, they're disposable. I buy them by the 50 pack. But you want to fan the brush out and just make sure you don't have any extra long hairs. It gets to be a pain. And then you're going to want to pull on them a little bit to see if any pull out, because the worst time to find out that you've got loose hairs in the brush is when you're epoxy in and the epoxy pulls them out, and now they're on your blank and you got to dig them out. So always check that first. Well, I still forget, and I get frustrated with myself when I forget to check it, because inevitably the one I forget to check is the one that dumps bristles in my epoxy. So let's get busy finishing this epoxy up. Also, you notice I marked my syringe so I don't mix them up next time I use them, and get the hardener in, get the part A in with the part B, and then it gets hard in your syringe. Alright, so now we've got 6 milliliters of epoxy and we're ready to start mixing. Alright, so we're done with the 3-minute mix time. It's back to clear again. It's got a few little bubbles in it, but we'll get those out with the heat gun later if we need to. I've got it up here on the stand, and you can see as I brush this epoxy on, all those scratch marks go away. That's the new coat of epoxy filling in the gaps, the scratches, and letting the light pass through straight again, which is giving us this beautiful clear look. I'm gonna finish this up real quick. Okay, now what I'm doing is I'm putting it on basically my dryer. It'd be the same thing if you set it up on your dryer, and it's turning slowly. And we're going to work on the epoxy ramp and some epoxy first layer in the area where the labels are going to go up ahead of the reel seat, because this is an X-ray blank, which means it is not sanded. It is not perfectly smooth. It's got a bit of a rough texture to it. If you don't sand a blank, it stays more sensitive, which is why they are so super sensitive. I'm also putting a layer of epoxy in the area where the hook keeper is going to go, because this being a flipping stick, you're going to have a big, 3/4 ounce or 1 ounce, 1.5 ounce weight hanging on the hook keeper when you're not using it, and that big weight and monster size hook is going to be banging on the blank And I just want to protect it just with one extra coat of epoxy. And then when we get this done, we'll put the hook keeper on over top of this first coat of epoxy. And it'll look great, plus it'll be protected. So there's the clear in the area where the hook keeper is going to go, and underneath where the label's going to go. I don't know if you noticed that, but on the dryer, these motors are bi-directional motors, so if you just put a little tension on the pulley with your thumb, it'll change directions. Alright, we're going to give it a shot of heat with the heat gun just to even everything out. Now you notice I've got my hand underneath the blank where I have the heat gun, and the reason I'm doing this is so I know how much heat is getting on that epoxy, because when my hand gets hot, that's plenty of heat. You don't want to overheat this epoxy. And the last few bubbles we had, there were some tiny ones, are now gone. We have a few minutes left on this epoxy before it gets to the point where you can't use it anymore. So what I thought I was going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of marbling and put a little metal flake in it and put some accent pieces around the reel seat and the fighting butt. Now we're going to try a swirl with a gold flake and a little charcoal black and see what kind of effect that gives us. Yep, I like that. We get that mixed in there really good with the marbling mud and the epoxy that's got a few minutes left on it before it sets. And you got a really cool gold flake swirl pattern in it now that I hope translates to the blank with some accent ramps here, because we're still trying to build this whole rear section up to be the size of a normal grip. So let's give this a whirl, see what it looks like on the blank. Now what this will do is having, you know, another 10 coats of clear over top of this, going to give it a really cool deep mirror gold effect, I hope. Again, this is the first time I've tried this, and y'all are learning along with me. We're going to make some mistakes together. Hopefully this is not one. Alright, this epoxy is about ready to cook off. Well, there it is, guys. That's how you fix epoxy whoops. I've done a bunch of them. I've got good at fixing them. You will too. Building up rods, you're going to make some mistakes. Hopefully I can show you how to fix them and maybe not make them to begin with, but you're still going to make them. Next time we're going to do a few more coats on this handle, put our labels on, and start with the spiral wrap. I'm still waiting on a tip. It's a monster tip on this rod. I had to order one. I've got 50 in stock and have anything big enough to fit it. So if this is your first video, watch this one next to get caught up to where we are. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.